My stepmother sold my inheritance before the body was cold. The funeral flowers were still wilting on Dad's grave when I got the call that would change everything. Oh honey, I'm so sorry, Linda's voice dripped with fake sympathy through my phone. I had to sell the Mustang collection. The estate expenses were just overwhelming, and the will was so unclear about the cars. I nearly dropped my phone in the parking lot of the funeral home. What do you mean you sold them? Dad promised me those cars since I was 16. The 67 Fastback alone was worth 60,000. Yes, I know, she interrupted with that patronizing tone she perfected over the 8 years she'd been married to my father. But sweetie, there were so many debts. The funeral costs, the hospital bills. I barely got 30 for the whole collection. 30,000. For 6 vintage Mustangs that Dad had lovingly restored over 2 decades. Cars he'd shown me every bolt and chrome detail of, explaining how someday they'd help me start my adult life. Cars he'd written about in his journal, specifically earmarked for me to inherit. Linda, it's been 3 days. 3 days since we buried him. How did you even? I know a dealer, she said quickly. Cash sale. No paperwork hassles. Really, it was a blessing. A blessing. My inheritance, my father's life's work, sold to some vulture for pennies on the dollar while I was still wearing my funeral dress. Where's the money now? I asked, my hands shaking. Well, after the expenses, there's not much left. Maybe we can discuss your portion when things settle down. My portion. Of my own inheritance. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom at Mom's house, staring at my laptop screen. $67,000 in student loans. Rent due in 2 weeks for my first apartment. A job at a nonprofit that paid $28,000 a year. Dad had known all of this. We talked about it just 2 months before the heart attack took him. Those cars are going to give you the freedom to chase your dreams instead of just bills, he'd said, polishing the chrome on a 69 Boss 429. Don't let anyone tell you different. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our old text messages. There it was, from last Christmas, the cars are yours, kiddo. Put it in the will next week. Linda knows. You'll never have to worry about those loans. Screenshot saved. Then I found the photos from Dad's 60th birthday party. Him standing proudly next to the fastback with his arm around me. This one's my daughter's favorite, he'd announced to everyone. It's going to put her through her master's degree someday. Linda had been standing right there, smiling and nodding. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Time to do some research on estate law, probate court, and exactly what kind of paper trail a cash sale actually creates. Linda might know a dealer, but she clearly didn't know that I'd spent 4 years studying journalism and knew how to investigate a story. And this story, about a grieving stepmother's urgent need for cash, about unclear wills and overwhelming expenses, was about to get very complicated for her. I had screenshots. I had witnesses. I had Dad's handwritten notes from his desk drawer that Linda didn't know I'd already secured. What I didn't have was mercy. Not anymore. The next morning, I called Whitman and Associates, the law firm that had handled Dad's will. The receptionist put me through to Margaret Whitman herself, apparently losing a client to a sudden heart attack at 58 warranted partner-level attention. I'm so sorry for your loss, Margaret said, her voice genuinely warm. Your father was a good man. Now, what can I help you with? I need to understand something about the will. My stepmother says it was unclear about Dad's car collection, but he told me explicitly those cars were mine. There was a pause. Papers rustling. I'm looking at the document now. Section 7, subsection C is quite specific. All motor vehicles, including but not limited to the vintage Mustang collection, shall pass to my daughter upon my death. There's nothing unclear about that language. My heart hammered. So Linda had no legal right to sell them? Not without your explicit written consent and proper probate procedures. Has the will been filed with the court yet? I don't know. It should have been filed within 10 days. Let me check our system. More keyboard clicking. That's odd. We prepared everything for filing, but Linda requested we hold off. Said the family needed time to process. Of course she did. I thanked Margaret and hung up, my mind racing. Linda was buying herself time, keeping the will out of official channels while she liquidated everything she could grab. I drove to Dad's house, Linda's house now, I supposed, with a sick feeling in my stomach. Her Mercedes was gone, but I still had my key. Dad had insisted I keep it, for emergencies. This qualified. The garage was empty except for oil stains on the concrete where the Mustangs had lived. 6 perfect rectangles of clean floor surrounded by 20 years of accumulated grease and memories. I took photos of everything, including the custom tool boards Dad had built, now stripped bare. Inside the house, I went straight to Dad's office. Linda had clearly been through it, filing cabinets hung open, papers scattered. But she'd missed the hiding spot Dad had shown me years ago. Behind his framed engineering degree was a wall safe I'd helped him install when I was 14. My birthday, April 15th, 99. The lock clicked open. Inside were Dad's insurance policies, the original titles to all 6 Mustangs, and a manila envelope labeled, for Sarah, just in case. My hands trembled as I opened it. 20 pages of handwritten notes in Dad's careful script. His concerns about Linda's spending habits. Credit card statements showing her $40,000 in secret debt. A receipt from a private investigator dated 6 months ago. And a letter addressed to me. Asterisk Sarah, if you're reading this, something happened to me and Linda's probably trying to take what's rightfully yours. The cars were never community property. I bought them all before we married and kept them titled in my name only. She knows this. The investigator's report is attached. Use it if you need to. I'm sorry, kiddo. I thought I was protecting our family, but I may have brought a wolf into our home. Don't let her take your future. Dad asterisk. The investigator's report detailed Linda's previous marriage. How she drained her first husband's accounts during his cancer treatment. How she'd sold his deceased son's memorabilia while the man was in hospice care. My phone rang. Linda. Sarah, honey, where are you? Mrs. Patterson saw someone at the house. I'm here, I said, looking at Dad's evidence spread across his desk. We need to talk. Oh good. Actually, I have wonderful news. I found some of your father's old tools in the garage. Maybe we could sell those too, split the money. Every little bit helps with expenses. The audacity was breathtaking. But now I understood, Linda wasn't just greedy. This was her pattern. Her profession. And I had 20 pages of proof. Actually, Linda, those tools aren't going anywhere, I said, walking back toward Dad's office with the phone pressed to my ear. And we need to discuss the real estate expenses you mentioned. Oh, well, you know, funeral costs, hospital bills. Her voice had that nervous flutter it got when she was cornered. I pulled out Dad's final hospital statement from the safe. You mean the $847 in outstanding bills? Because that's what Methodist General shows as the balance after insurance. Or are you talking about Restwood Funeral Home? Because I called them this morning. Dad's life insurance policy covered the entire $12,000 funeral cost with $3,000 left over. Silence. Sarah, honey, there were other expenses. Like your visa payment. The one for $3,200 that you charged at Nordstrom 2 days after Dad died. I'd found the statement in his desk. Or maybe the $1,500 you spent at that spa in Scottsdale last weekend while I was cleaning out Dad's office. The front door slammed. Linda's heels clicked rapidly across the hardwood floor. What are you doing in my house? She demanded, appearing in the doorway. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was windblown, her designer workout clothes wrinkled like she'd rushed over here. Dad's house, I corrected, holding up the deed I'd found in the safe. Which, according to this, was never transferred to joint ownership. Still in his name only. Linda's face went pale under her spray tan. That's impossible. We've been married 8 years. In a state where assets purchased before marriage remain separate property unless explicitly transferred. I'd spent the morning on legal websites. Dad was smarter than you thought. She lunged forward, trying to grab the papers from Dad's desk. I was faster, sweeping everything back into the manila envelope. You can't just take those. Actually, I can. This envelope is addressed to me, found in Dad's personal safe. I held up my phone. And I've been recording this conversation since you walked in. Linda's carefully constructed mask finally slipped. The grieving widow routine vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. You little bitch. You think you're so smart. Those cars are gone. Sold to a private collector in Nevada for cash. No receipts, no paper trail. You'll never prove what they were worth. Tommy Chin at Classic Auto Trader might disagree, I said calmly. Especially since he posted photos of Dad's 67 Fastback on Instagram yesterday with the caption, amazing barn find, seller desperate, got this beauty for $8,000. The comments are fascinating. 17 people saying it's worth at least $60,000. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Oh, and Tommy was very chatty when I called him an hour ago. Apparently, you told him the cars belonged to your dead ex-husband who never had kids. He felt terrible when I explained that the dead man was my father and those were my inheritance. I stood up, Dad's envelope clutched in my hands. Tommy's bringing the Fastback back tomorrow. Says he doesn't want stolen goods on his lot. He's also giving me contact information for the other buyers. You can't prove I stole anything. Conversion of property. Breach of fiduciary duty. Fraud. I walked toward the door. Margaret Whitman filed Dad's will with probate court this morning. You're officially in violation of a legal document, Linda. She grabbed my arm as I passed. Sarah, wait. We can work this out. The money from the other cars, I still have most of it. We can split it, 50-50. I looked down at her manicured nails digging into my sleeve, then back at her desperate face. I don't want half, Linda. I want everything. Every car, every dollar, every lie exposed. I pulled free and headed for the door. This isn't over, she called after me. She was right about that. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Linda and a text that made my blood run cold, talk to Margaret Whitman. Seems there might be 2 wills. Amazing what you find when you really look. I called Margaret immediately. Sarah, I'm glad you called, she said, but her voice had lost yesterday's warmth. Linda came in late yesterday with some concerning documents. My stomach dropped. What kind of documents? A handwritten will dated 3 weeks after the one we prepared. It's brief, but it specifically revokes the car bequest and leaves everything to Linda except for a $10,000 cash inheritance for you. I sat down hard on my bed. That's impossible. Dad would never. The handwriting appears consistent with your father's other documents. I'm sorry, Sarah. If this is legitimate, it supersedes our formal will. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for 10 minutes, trying not to panic. Then I called the one person who might have answers, Janet Morrison, Dad's assistant for 15 years at the engineering firm. Oh honey, Janet said when I explained the situation. Your father did mention updating his will recently, but not to cut you out. He was worried about Linda's spending and wanted to protect your inheritance better. Did he ever dictate letters to you? Personal stuff. Sometimes. He had arthritis in his right hand, the years of detailed mechanical work, you know. When it flared up bad, he'd have me write things out, then he'd copy them over in his own handwriting. My heart started pounding. Janet, this is important. Did Dad's handwriting change in the last few months? Get shakier or different? Well, yes, actually. The arthritis was getting worse. His writing got more cramped, letters smaller. Why? I need you to look at something. An hour later, Janet met me at a coffee shop downtown, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied photos of the supposed second will on my phone. Sarah, this isn't right, she said immediately. Look at the letter G in give, see how it loops. Your father stopped making that loop about 2 years ago when his hands started bothering him. And the pressure on the pen strokes is too consistent. When he was having a bad arthritis day, the pressure would vary. So it's forged. I bet my pension on it. I watched that man write thousands of documents. This isn't his natural hand. I took screenshots of her pointing out the inconsistencies, then called Margaret back. I need that will examined by a handwriting expert, I told her. And I need to know exactly when Linda claims Dad wrote it. She says it was February 18th. He called her at work, upset about something, and told her he was making changes. February 18th. I knew that date. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photo gallery until I found what I was looking for, Dad and me at my college graduation dinner, both of us grinning over steaks at Romano's. The date stamp read February 18th, 7:30 p.m. We'd been together until almost midnight. Margaret, I have proof Dad couldn't have written that will on February 18th. Can you recommend a forensic handwriting analyst? Sarah, those examinations cost money. I'll figure it out. How much? Usually $2,500 to $4,000 for a complete analysis. Money I didn't have. But I thought about Dad's letter, about how he called Linda a wolf. About the investigator's report detailing her pattern of financial abuse. I hung up and immediately called Channel 7 News. If I was going broke fighting this, I might as well make it public. News Tips Hotline, this is Derek. Hi, I have a story about inheritance fraud. A stepmother forged a will to steal a daughter's inheritance 3 days after the funeral. I'm listening. 20 minutes later, Derek Martinez, an investigative reporter, was driving to meet me. I spread everything out on Janet's kitchen table, the original will, photos of the forged one, Dad's investigators' report about Linda's past, bank statements showing her shopping sprees, and the hospital records proving her overwhelming expenses were lies. Derek's eyes lit up. This is exactly the kind of predatory behavior we've been tracking. We're working on a series about financial elder abuse and inheritance theft. Would you be willing to go on camera? Linda had threatened that this wasn't over. She was about to find out exactly how right she was. The Channel 7 interview aired Tuesday evening during the 6 o'clock news. I watched from Mom's living room, my stomach churning as Derek Martinez's voice narrated over photos of Dad's empty garage and Linda's forged will. A local woman claims her stepmother forged documents to steal a $200,000 inheritance, selling off a prized vintage car collection within days of her father's funeral, Derek announced. Tonight at 11, we investigate a pattern of predatory behavior that may span multiple marriages. My phone started ringing before the teaser even finished. First call was from Tommy Chen. Sarah, I just saw the news. I have the fastback ready for pickup, but there's something else. That lady, Linda. She came back this morning with another car. A 69 Boss 429. Said she found the title and wanted to sell it quick. My blood went cold. The Boss 429 had been Dad's crown jewel, the car he'd spent 3 years hunting down and another 2 fully restoring. It was worth at least $80,000. Tommy, please don't let her sell it. I'm on my way. I grabbed Mom's keys and raced across town to Classic Auto Trader. Tommy met me in the parking lot, shaking his head. She's getting desperate, he said, leading me to where the boss sat gleaming under the lot lights. Wanted 12 grand cash, today only. Said she was moving to Florida tomorrow. Moving to Florida. Of course. Just like she'd done after her first husband died. Did she have the title? That's the weird part. Tommy pulled out a manila folder. Title looks legitimate, but when I ran the VIN through our system, it showed a lien from First National Bank dated last month. I stared at the paperwork. Dad never borrowed money against his cars. Ever. That's what I figured when I saw the news. Lady forged a will, probably forged a loan document too. I told her the car needed to sit until ownership got sorted out. She went ballistic. Tommy showed me security footage on his phone from that afternoon. Linda screaming at him across the sales counter, demanding he return the Boss 429 immediately. Her careful composure completely shattered, designer purse clutched like a weapon. She kept saying someone was trying to destroy her life, Tommy said. That you were spreading lies about her. I drove home with the fastback, Dad's favorite car finally back where it belonged. But pulling into Mom's driveway, I noticed a silver sedan parked across the street. The same sedan that had been behind me for the last 10 miles. My phone rang as I killed the engine. Unknown number. Sarah. The voice was male, older. This is Robert Henley. I was married to Linda before your father. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. How did you get this number? Saw the news story. Look, I tried to warn your father 2 years ago, but Linda intercepted my letter. Can we meet? There are things you need to know about what she's capable of. We agreed to meet at Denny's on 5th Street. Robert turned out to be a thin, tired-looking man in his 60s, carrying a banker's box that he set carefully on the booth table. My son Michael died in a car accident 3 years into my marriage to Linda, he began. He was 26, had a small life insurance policy and some collectibles. Baseball cards, mostly, but some were worth serious money. I already knew where this was going. She sold everything while I was in the hospital recovering from my first heart surgery. Told me Michael's stuff was just taking up space, that she donated it all to charity. Robert's hands shook slightly. Found out later she'd got nearly $30,000 for his rookie Mickey Mantle card alone. He opened the banker's box, revealing stacks of documents. After your story aired, I called my attorney. We've been building a case against Linda for 3 years, but we needed more victims to establish pattern in practice. How many others are there? You're number 4 that we know of. Linda Marie Fletcher, that's her real name, by the way. She's been Linda Martinez, Linda Henley, and Linda Coleman. Married name changes, but same social security number. Robert spread out a timeline across the Denny's table. For marriages over 15 years. For widowers with adult children. For systematic campaigns of financial manipulation and theft. She researches her targets, Robert continued. Finds men with assets but no current wife, usually through grief counseling groups or church singles events. She's patient, charming, plays the perfect supportive partner until the ring's on her finger. Then what? Then she starts isolating them from their kids, creating financial emergencies that require liquidating assets, and positioning herself as the responsible one managing money while the husband focuses on healing. Robert pulled out a photograph. Linda's real name is Linda Marie Costello. She's originally from Phoenix, and this isn't her first time using forged documents. The photo showed a newspaper clipping from the Arizona Republic dated 8 years ago, woman charged with elder fraud skips bail. The accompanying mugshot was definitely Linda, though she'd since had extensive cosmetic work done. She jumped bail and disappeared. Changed her name, moved to our state, started over. Robert's voice turned hard. Your father wasn't her first victim, Sarah. He was just her most successful one. I stared at the evidence spread across our table, feeling sick. Why didn't anyone stop her? She's smart. Never stays in one place long enough for cases to build momentum. Always moves on before the legal system can catch up. Robert leaned forward. But your news story changed everything. Now she can't run without looking guilty, and we have her pattern documented across state lines. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Drop the investigation or you'll regret it. I showed Robert the message. He nodded grimly. She's cornered now. That makes her dangerous, but it also makes her sloppy. As if on cue, my phone rang. Linda. You selfish little bitch, she hissed without preamble. You have no idea what you've started. Robert gestured for me to put the call on speaker. I gave your father the best years of my life, Linda continued, and this is how you repay me. Spreading lies on television. Which part was a lie? I asked calmly. The forged will or the stolen cars? Those cars were community property. Actually, they weren't. But thanks for admitting you knew they had value when you sold them for $30,000. Silence. Then, this isn't over, Sarah. I have resources you can't imagine. The line went dead. Robert was already packing up his documents. She just made a threat on a recorded call. We need to get this to the police and the DA's office tonight. As we left Denny's, I noticed the same silver sedan from earlier parked at the far end of the lot. Linda's resources, apparently, included surveillance. The next morning, I woke up to my car's alarm screaming in Mom's driveway. By the time I threw on clothes and ran outside, whoever had been messing with the fastback was gone, but they'd left their message, deep scratches carved into the driver's side door spelling out, liar. That's it, Mom said, appearing beside me in her bathrobe. We're calling the police. Officer Martinez, no relation to the news reporter, took photos of the vandalism and my statement about Linda's threatening call. But his expression told me everything I needed to know about how seriously the police take family disputes. Have you considered that maybe your stepmother is just grieving too, he suggested. Sometimes people make poor financial decisions when they're emotional. I showed him the forged will on my phone. Grief doesn't explain document fraud. Ma'am, that's a civil matter. You'll need to handle that through probate court. After he left, I called Derek Martinez to report the vandalism. This actually helps your case, he said. Shows escalating behavior. We're running the follow-up story tonight. I interviewed Robert Henley and got copies of Linda's Arizona arrest warrant. That afternoon, Margaret Whitman called with an update on the handwriting analysis. The expert can see us Friday, but Sarah, there's been a complication. Linda's attorney filed an emergency motion to freeze all estate assets pending resolution of the will dispute. What does that mean? It means nothing gets distributed to anyone until this is settled. No cars, no money, nothing. She's essentially holding the entire estate hostage. I hung up and immediately drove to Dad's house, not sure what I expected to find. Linda's Mercedes was in the driveway, along with a U-Haul truck. Through the front window, I could see boxes stacked everywhere. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, check your email. The message that appeared in my inbox made my blood freeze. Asterisk Sarah, stop the investigation immediately or these photos go to Channel 7. Some secrets are worth more than old cars. L asterisk. The attached photos showed me and my ex-boyfriend Jake from 2 years ago at what had obviously been a party. The images were cropped and edited to look far more compromising than they actually were, but in today's social media world, context didn't matter. I called Robert Henley immediately. She's trying to blackmail me with fake photos. Classic Linda. When legal threats don't work, she goes for character assassination. Robert's voice was grim. She tried the same thing with my daughter when we started investigating her. Claimed she had proof of drug use. What did you do? Called her bluff. The photos were from a prescription medication Linda had planted in my daughter's purse, then photographed. We proved it was a setup. But even as Robert talked me down from panic, I could see Linda's strategy. Make me look unreliable, discredit my claims, turn this into a he-said-she-said situation where her tears and widow act would play better than my evidence. My phone rang. Derek Martinez. Sarah, we have a problem. Someone called the station claiming you're mentally unstable and making up stories about your stepmother for attention. Says you've been in therapy for daddy issues and have a history of lying about family members. Linda was fighting back on every front. Derek, none of that is true. I know. But my editor is getting nervous about tonight's story. Wants more verification before we air the investigation into her other marriages. I hung up and stared at Dad's house, watching Linda load boxes into the U-Haul. She was preparing to run, just like she had in Arizona. In 24 hours, she'd be gone with whatever assets she could grab, leaving me with nothing but legal bills and a vandalized car. Unless I could prove the forgery before she disappeared. I had until Friday's handwriting analysis, but something told me Linda wouldn't wait that long. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every car that passed Mom's house made me jump, expecting Linda, or one of her resources, to escalate beyond vandalism. At 3 a.m., I gave up and drove back to Dad's neighborhood, parking 3 blocks away where I could watch the house. The U-Haul was gone, but Linda's Mercedes remained. More concerning were the lights on in Dad's office, the same office where I'd found his evidence just days ago. I crept around to the side yard where Dad's office window faced the garden. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see Linda hunched over Dad's desk with what looked like a magnifying glass, practicing something on paper. She'd write a few words, crumple the page, start over. Write, crumple, repeat. She was perfecting Dad's handwriting. My phone was dead, of course. I ran back to my car to grab the charger, but by the time I returned, the office lights were off and Linda's Mercedes was pulling out of the driveway. I managed to snap a photo of her license plate as she passed under the streetlight, noting the timestamp, 3:47 a.m. The next morning, I called Margaret Whitman before her office even opened, leaving a detailed voicemail about Linda's midnight forgery session. Then I drove to Classic Auto Trader, hoping Tommy might have security cameras that covered the street. "You look like hell," Tommy greeted me. "Everything okay?" I explained about catching Linda practicing handwriting in the middle of the night. Tommy's expression darkened. "That explains the weird call I got at 5 this morning. Someone claiming to be your father's business partner, saying there was a mistake with the boss 429's paperwork. Wanted to know if I'd accept a corrected title. What did you tell them?" "Told them I don't do business at 5 a.m. with people who won't give their real names." Tommy led me to his office. "But Sarah, there's something else. That silver sedan you were worried about. It was parked across from my lot yesterday from about noon to closing. Different driver than the photos you showed me." He pulled up his exterior security footage on his computer. The sedan's driver was a heavy-set man in a baseball cap, definitely not Linda. He'd spent 6 hours just watching Tommy's lot, occasionally taking photos with a long-lens camera. "Professional surveillance," I said, feeling sick. "She really does have resources." Tommy rewound the footage to show the man's license plate. "Already ran it. Cars registered to Pinnacle Investigations out of Riverside. Expensive outfit that specializes in asset recovery and personal security." Asset recovery. Linda was building a case to claim the cars were legitimately hers, gathering evidence of me, harassing her business associates, and stalking her property sales. My phone rang. Robert Henley, and he sounded panicked. "Sarah, Linda's attorney just served me with a restraining order. Claims I've been threatening her and interfering with her grief process. I can't be within 500 feet of her or any property connected to your father's estate." "On what grounds?" "Says I called her 20 times yesterday making threats. Problem is, I was in court all day yesterday for my nephew's custody hearing. Got 12 witnesses and a judge who can verify I never left the building. But Linda's strategy was becoming clear. Isolate me from my allies, discredit anyone who could support my claims, make herself look like the victim of a harassment campaign by unstable people who couldn't accept her husband's final wishes." "Robert, what happens if the handwriting expert can't definitively prove forgery?" The pause told me everything. "Then it becomes a credibility contest. Grieving widow versus angry stepdaughter. Linda's played this game before, Sarah. She knows how to work the system." After hanging up, I sat in Tommy's office staring at surveillance footage of the man watching his lot. Linda had hired professionals, filed legal motions, and was systematically dismantling my case while positioning herself as the victim. But she'd made one mistake last night. She'd let me see her practicing Dad's handwriting, which meant she wasn't confident in her original forgery. I pulled out my phone and called Derek Martinez. "I need you to meet me at Dad's house tonight. Bring a camera crew." "Sarah, after those character assassination calls, my editor's pretty gun-shy. Linda's planning to forge another document tonight. I can prove it, but I need witnesses." "How can you possibly know that?" I looked at Tommy's security footage again, noting the timestamp of Linda's 3 a.m. departure. She'd left Dad's house exactly 12 minutes after her investigator had driven away from Classic Auto Trader. Because she's on a schedule. That evening, I positioned myself in the same spot in Dad's side yard, this time with a fully charged phone and Derek Martinez crouched beside me with a camera. We'd been waiting for 2 hours when Linda's Mercedes finally pulled into the driveway at 11:30 p.m. "She's later than yesterday," I whispered to Derek as we watched her unlock the front door. "Maybe she spotted us," he whispered back. But 10 minutes later, the office lights came on, and through the gap in the curtains, we could see Linda settling at Dad's desk with a stack of papers and that same magnifying glass. Derek started filming as Linda began her practice routine. Write, examine, crumple. Write, examine, crumple. But tonight was different. She had reference material spread across the desk. Through the camera's zoom lens, we could make out what looked like genuine documents in Dad's handwriting alongside her practice sheets. "She's using something as a template," Derek murmured, adjusting his focus. "Can you see what it is?" I squinted through the window. Linda held up a document to the light, tracing something with her finger. My heart sank as I recognized the letterhead. "It's Dad's medical records from the hospital," I said. "He had to fill out forms by hand during his last visit. She's copying the handwriting from when his arthritis was really bad." Which was brilliant, in a sick way. If Linda could replicate Dad's compromised handwriting from his final weeks, it would explain why the forged will look shakier than his usual script. She was building plausible deniability for the handwriting expert. Derek kept filming as Linda worked. After 20 minutes of practice, she pulled out a fresh sheet of legal paper and began writing slowly, carefully. This wasn't practice anymore, this was the real thing. "She's creating a new document," I breathed. "Something to replace the forged will." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Look behind you." Derek and I spun around. The heavy-set man from Tommy's surveillance footage stood 10 feet away, no longer bothering with a baseball cap. In the moonlight, I could see he was holding something that definitely wasn't a camera. "Evening, folks," he said in a gravelly voice. "Seems like you're trespassing on private property." "It's a public sidewalk," Derek said, but his voice shook slightly. "Funny thing about property lines," the man replied, stepping closer. "Sometimes they're not where people think they are. Mrs. Coleman's been having trouble with stalkers lately. Makes her nervous." Mrs. Coleman. Linda was already using a new name. Derek's camera was still recording, which the man seemed to realize at the same moment I did. His expression shifted from casual menace to genuine concern. "Turn that thing off," he ordered. "Actually, let's keep it running," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm sure your employer would love to explain why she hired private security to intimidate a news crew documenting her forgery activities." Through the window, Linda had apparently finished her document and was now photographing it alongside Dad's medical records, creating a side-by-side comparison to support her claim that his handwriting had deteriorated in his final weeks. The security guy was looking between us and the house, clearly trying to calculate his next move. That's when I heard the sirens. Expecting company? Derek asked. I wasn't, but someone had apparently called in a disturbance. 2 police cruisers pulled up just as Linda's office lights went dark. She must have heard the sirens too. Officer Martinez, my favorite skeptical cop, emerged from the first car, looking deeply annoyed to see me again. Miss Coleman, what seems to be the problem now? But it was the security guy who answered. These people were peering into windows, filming without permission. Mrs. Coleman called for assistance. Derek held up his press credentials. We were documenting suspected document fraud from a public sidewalk. With a telephoto lens pointed into someone's home, Officer Martinez replied. That's still invasion of privacy. As the cops sorted out who had the right to beware, Linda emerged from the house looking perfectly composed in silk pajamas and a robe, playing the part of a frightened widow disturbed by stalkers. Officers, thank you for coming so quickly, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. These people have been harassing me for days. I'm just trying to grieve my husband in peace. It was a masterful performance, but she'd made one crucial mistake. In her rush to get outside and play victim, Linda had left Dad's office window open. And Derek's camera had captured everything. The next morning brought a call that changed everything again. Margaret Whitman's voice was tight with controlled anger when she reached me at 7 a.m. Sarah, Linda's attorney just filed another emergency motion. She's claiming you've been criminally harassing her and that your unstable behavior proves the original will leaving everything to her is valid. What unstable behavior? I asked, though I already knew. Breaking into her home, stalking her with news crews, vandalizing her property. Margaret's sigh was audible. The judge granted a temporary restraining order. You can't go within 1,000 feet of Linda or any property connected to the estate. But Derek's footage proves she was forging documents, which his editor apparently won't air without more legal review. Something about unclear circumstances and potential privacy violations. I hung up and immediately called Derek, but got his voicemail. When I tried the Channel 7 main number, the receptionist told me Derek was unavailable for comment on ongoing investigations. Linda had gotten to them. Somehow. 2 hours later, I found out how. Robert Henley called with devastating news. Someone leaked your college disciplinary record to the media, he said without preamble. The incident from sophomore year when you were accused of falsifying a professor's signature on a grade change form. My stomach dropped. The charges had been dismissed when security footage proved I wasn't even on campus that day, but the initial accusation was still in my file. How did anyone even know about that? Professional investigators with the right contacts. It doesn't matter that you were cleared, Sarah. The headline is, Woman Accused of Document Forgery Has History of Falsification Claims. The story was already spreading on social media, shared by accounts that had been created just days ago. Linda's resources extended beyond surveillance and intimidation. She was conducting a full-scale character assassination campaign. My phone rang constantly with blocked numbers, each caller claiming to be a journalist asking for comment about my pattern of making false accusations against family members. When I finally turned it off, someone started calling Mom's landline. Sarah, honey, Mom said, finding me hiding in my childhood bedroom, there are reporters outside. They're asking the neighbors about your mental health history and whether I think you're capable of making up stories for money. I looked out my bedroom window. 3 news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes extended like metallic flowers reaching toward the sky. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. Linda had turned me into a public spectacle. That afternoon, I got a call from Janet Morrison, Dad's assistant. Her voice was shaky with fear. Sarah, someone broke into the office last night. They didn't take any equipment or petty cash, but they went straight to your father's filing cabinet. Every handwriting sample from the last 2 years is gone. The arthritis samples. Linda was eliminating evidence that could prove her forgery by showing how Dad's handwriting had actually evolved during his illness. Janet, did you make copies of anything? Some things, yes. I kept personal files of engineers I worked with closely. Your father's are at my house. Don't tell anyone else about those. And Janet? Be careful. After hanging up, I realized Linda's strategy was more sophisticated than I'd imagined. She wasn't just trying to discredit me, she was systematically destroying evidence while creating a narrative where I was an unstable, money-hungry stepdaughter harassing a grieving widow. And it was working. By evening, #inheritance scam was trending on Twitter, but not the way I'd hoped. The consensus seemed to be that I was a spoiled brat who couldn't accept Daddy's new wife. The few people defending me were drowned out by accounts with generic names posting remarkably similar talking points about gold-digging children and respecting the deceased's final wishes. Linda had bought herself an army of trolls. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. The reporters had finally left, but the damage was done. Mom's neighbors were avoiding eye contact, and someone had spray-painted "liar" across our mailbox in the same block letters that had been carved into Dad's Mustang. I was scrolling through the latest wave of social media attacks when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I was past caring. Sarah. The voice was female, young, nervous. This is Amanda Chen, Tommy's daughter. From Classic Auto Trader. I sat up straighter. Amanda, hi. Is everything okay? Not really. Mom says I shouldn't get involved, but I work part-time doing books for Dad's business, and there's something weird about that Linda lady's transactions. My heart started pounding. What kind of weird? She paid for the car storage and transport fees with a cashier's check from First Federal Bank. But when I called to verify it for our records, they said the account it was drawn on belongs to someone named Patricia Henley. Patricia Henley. Robert's late wife. Amanda, are you absolutely sure about that name? Positive. I even asked them to spell it twice. The bank guy said it was weird because Patricia Henley's been dead for 3 years, but someone's been making transactions on her account as recently as last month. After Amanda hung up, I immediately called Robert, but got his voicemail. I tried 3 more times before remembering the restraining order. Linda's lawyers had probably advised him not to take my calls. Instead, I drove to Janet Morrison's house at 11 p.m., praying she was still awake. Her porch light came on before I even knocked. "Sarah, thank God," she said, pulling me inside quickly. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Someone's been calling my work asking about your father's financial difficulties and whether he seemed mentally compromised in his final months." "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that your father was sharp as a tack right up until the heart attack." "But Sarah, they knew things. Specific things about his work projects, his doctor appointments. Someone's been digging deep into his life." Janet led me to her kitchen table, where she'd spread out copies of Dad's work files. "I've been going through everything since the break-in, and I found something that doesn't make sense." She handed me a photocopy of a bank deposit slip dated 2 months before Dad died. The amount was $47,000, exactly what Robert had told me his late wife Patricia's life insurance policy was worth. "Your father never mentioned any large deposits to me," Janet continued. "And look at the account number, it doesn't match any of his regular business or personal accounts." I stared at the deposit slip, pieces clicking together. "Janet, what if Linda never stopped accessing her previous husband's accounts? What if she's been using Patricia Henley's identity to hide money?" "You mean identity theft on top of everything else?" Before I could answer, Janet's landline rang. She glanced at the caller ID and went pale. "It's her," Janet whispered. "Linda." At midnight. I motioned for her to answer while I grabbed my phone to record. "Hello," Janet said carefully. "Janet Morrison." Linda's voice was crisp, professional. "This is Linda Coleman. I understand you've been sharing confidential information about my late husband's business affairs." "I haven't shared anything inappropriate. Those files belong to his estate now, which means they belong to me. Any further distribution of private documents will result in legal action." Linda's tone turned threatening. "I'd hate to see someone lose their pension over a misunderstanding about confidentiality." Janet's face went white. After 30 years at the engineering firm, her pension was everything. "I understand," Janet said quietly. "Good. And Janet? I know you've been in contact with certain people who are spreading lies about me. That needs to stop immediately." The line went dead. Janet sank into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 68 years. "She's going to destroy me," Janet whispered. "Sarah, I can't afford to lose my job. My husband's medical bills." "She can't actually do anything to you," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure they were true. Linda had already proven she could manipulate legal proceedings and public opinion with terrifying efficiency. "You don't understand," Janet said, gathering up Dad's files with shaking hands. "Linda knows people at the firm. She attended every company Christmas party, every retirement dinner. She could claim your father shared proprietary information with me inappropriately, or that I've been stealing confidential documents." I watched Janet lock Dad's files in her personal safe, realizing Linda had just eliminated another crucial ally. My evidence was disappearing piece by piece, while Linda's web of lies grew stronger. As I drove home through empty streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing a war I didn't even know I was fighting. The next morning brought the call I'd been dreading. Margaret Whitman's voice was carefully neutral, which told me everything before she even spoke. "Sarah, the handwriting expert finished his preliminary analysis. I'm afraid the results are inconclusive." I sat down hard on Mom's kitchen chair. "What does that mean?" "It means Dr. Reeves can't definitively prove the will is forged. The handwriting shows characteristics consistent with your father's natural hand, but also signs of the arthritis-related deterioration we'd expect from his final weeks." Of course it did. Linda had been practicing with Dad's medical forms, perfecting the shaky script of a man whose hands were failing him. However, Margaret continued, "Dr. Reeves did note some anomalies. The ink pressure is unusually consistent for someone with severe joint pain, and there are microscopic hesitation marks suggesting the writer was copying rather than composing naturally. So he knows it's fake, he just can't prove it legally." Essentially, yes. In a courtroom, this becomes a battle of expert witnesses. Linda's team could easily find someone willing to testify that the will is genuine. After hanging up, I stared at Dad's files spread across the kitchen table, feeling the walls closing in. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered was being systematically neutralized by Linda's superior resources and legal maneuvering. That's when Mom appeared in the doorway with a grim expression and her laptop. "Sarah, you need to see this," she said, setting the computer in front of me. "Someone created a GoFundMe page in your name." The page was titled, "Help Sarah Get Mental Health Treatment," and featured the most unflattering photo from my college Facebook, me at a party with red eyes and a forced smile. The description was devastating. Asterisk Sarah Coleman is struggling with grief and financial stress following her father's death. Instead of accepting help from her loving stepmother, she's created elaborate conspiracy theories about forged documents and stolen inheritances. Friends and family are raising money to get Sarah the psychological counseling she desperately needs, asterisk. The page had raised $3,247 in just 12 hours, with comments ranging from sympathetic, "Grief can make people delusional," to "Cruel, spoiled brat needs to get a job." Most disturbing were the detailed testimonials from people claiming to be my former classmates, describing a pattern of attention-seeking behavior and false accusations. "I've never seen any of these people before in my life," I told Mom, scrolling through the donors list. "These are all fake accounts." But that didn't matter. The page had been shared 847 times across Facebook and Twitter, each share adding credibility to Linda's narrative that I was mentally unstable and harassing a grieving widow. My phone rang. Derek Martinez. "Sarah, I'm sorry to do this over the phone, but my editor killed the story. Legal says we can't air anything that might be seen as encouraging harassment of a private citizen." "What about the footage of her forging documents?" "Legally, we can't prove that's what we filmed. Could have been her practicing her late husband's signature for insurance paperwork, or any number of legitimate activities." Derek's voice was genuinely apologetic. "The network got calls from 3 different law firms yesterday threatening defamation suits if we air anything about Linda Coleman." 3 law firms. Linda wasn't just fighting back, she was carpet bombing every angle of attack with overwhelming legal firepower. After Derek hung up, I called Tommy Chin to check on Dad's remaining cars. His receptionist put me on hold for 5 minutes before Tommy finally picked up. Sarah, I can't talk long, he said in a hushed voice. Linda's attorney served me with papers yesterday. Says I'm in possession of stolen property and they're demanding immediate return of both Mustangs. On what grounds? The forged will, plus something about your father owing money on the cars. They've got loan documents showing he used the Mustangs as collateral for a $75,000 business loan 6 months ago. More forgeries. Linda was creating an entire alternate financial history where Dad had been secretly drowning in debt, justifying her quick asset sales as necessary to cover his obligations. Tommy, those loan papers are fake. I know that, and you know that, but I run a small business, Sarah. I can't afford to fight a team of lawyers, especially when they're threatening to report me to the state licensing board for dealing in stolen vehicles. I hung up knowing I just lost Dad's cars again. Without Tommy's support, I had no way to prove the Mustangs had been sold illegally, and no leverage to get them back. But as I sat staring at the fake GoFundMe page, something clicked. Linda's campaign was too perfect, too coordinated. The social media accounts, the legal threats, the forged loan documents, she was running a sophisticated operation that required serious resources and expertise. Resources that might be traceable if I could figure out how she was paying for them. I pulled up the bank deposit slip Janet had found, the one for $47,000 from Patricia Henley's account. If Linda was still accessing her dead husband's wife's financial accounts, there might be a paper trail connecting her to identity theft and wire fraud, federal crimes that carried real consequences. It was time to call someone with more authority than local police. The FBI field office in downtown was nothing like I'd imagined from TV shows. Agent Rebecca Torres looked more like a tired accountant than a federal investigator, her desk buried under manila folders and empty coffee cups. But when I spread out my evidence, the forged documents, the Patricia Henley bank records, Linda's pattern across multiple marriages, her expression sharpened considerably. Financial identity theft across state lines, she said, photographing each document with her phone. If your stepmother is accessing accounts belonging to deceased individuals, that's federal wire fraud. How certain are you about this Patricia Henley connection? Amanda Chen at Classic Auto Trader verified the cashier's check came from Patricia's account. Patricia died 3 years ago, but someone's been making transactions as recently as last month. I pulled out Robert Henley's timeline. Linda's done this before, Arizona, Nevada, now here. She finds widowers, marries them, then systematically drains any accounts she can access. Agent Torres made notes on a yellow legal pad. The challenge is proving she's the one making these transactions. Banks require identification for large withdrawals, but if she's good at this. She's very good at this. Look at how she's destroyed my credibility in less than 2 weeks. I showed Torres the fake GoFundMe page on my phone. Professional level character assassination campaign, multiple law firms, private investigators. This isn't amateur hour. Torres leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. Sarah, I have to ask, is there any possibility your father actually did change his will? People sometimes make financial decisions their families don't understand. 3 weeks after our last conversation where he promised me the cars would handle my student loans. After he specifically told his attorney to put it in writing. I shook my head. Agent Torres, my father was an engineer. He documented everything. If he'd changed his mind about my inheritance, there would be a paper trail 6 inches thick explaining exactly why. She nodded slowly. The identity theft angle gives us jurisdiction, but building a case takes time. Meanwhile, your stepmother could disappear like she did in Arizona. That's when I remembered something crucial. She can't run this time. There's a probate case pending. If she leaves the state while estate assets are in dispute, doesn't that look like flight risk? Depends on whether she's liquidated everything she plans to steal. Torres stood up, gathering my documents. I'm going to start some preliminary inquiries, but Sarah, you need to be extremely careful. If Linda Coleman is running a multi-state fraud operation, she's got resources and connections we don't fully understand yet. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, meeting at Riverside Park, 2 p.m. Come alone or the photos go public tomorrow. Final warning. Torres saw my face change. What is it? I showed her the message. She immediately grabbed her desk phone. I'm calling for surveillance backup, she said, dialing. This woman just made contact threatening a federal witness. I'm not officially a witness yet. You are now. Torres spoke rapidly to whoever answered. We'll wire you up, have agents positioned around the park. If she's planning to threaten you directly, we'll have it on record. 2 hours later, I sat on a park bench wearing a wire, watching families enjoy the sunny afternoon while federal agents pretended to jog and read newspapers around the perimeter. Linda arrived exactly on time, looking like she'd stepped out of a country club catalog in her white tennis outfit and designer sunglasses. Hello, Sarah, she said, sitting down beside me like we were old friends meeting for coffee. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what you really want. The wire felt like it was burning against my chest as Linda smiled that perfect, predatory smile I'd grown to hate. I want my father's cars back, I said simply. And I want you to admit you forged his will. Linda laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. Oh, sweetie. We both know this was never really about the cars. Linda's words hit me like ice water. What do you mean this was never about the cars? Please. A smart girl like you, journalism degree, investigative skills. She adjusted her sunglasses, completely relaxed despite the federal agents I knew were watching us. You figured out my pattern weeks ago. The other husbands, the accounts, all of it. This little crusade isn't about $60,000 in vintage Mustangs. My heart hammered against the wire. Then what's it about? It's about proving you're smarter than Daddy's new wife. It's about punishing me for taking your father's attention away from his precious little girl. Linda's voice carried that familiar patronizing tone, but now there was steel underneath. 8 years, Sarah. 8 years I took care of that man while you were off at college, living your life, barely calling home. That's not. Christmas visits and birthday cards don't constitute a relationship, honey. I was there for his arthritis flare-ups, his insomnia, his anxiety about retirement. I earned those cars through 8 years of actual devotion. The manipulation was breathtaking. Even now, with federal agents recording every word, Linda was rewriting history to make herself the victim. You forged his will, I said quietly. I watched you practicing his handwriting. Linda smiled wider. Prove it. Your handwriting expert was inconclusive, the video footage shows nothing illegal, and frankly, after your very public breakdown this week, who's going to believe the unstable stepdaughter over the grieving widow? She reached into her tennis bag and pulled out a manila envelope. But I'm not unreasonable. Your father did love you, in his way. So I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 to walk away. Cash, today, no questions asked. $50,000. More than enough to handle my student loans and give me a fresh start. The smart play would be to take the money and run, just like Linda's previous victims had probably done. Where would you get $50,000 in cash on short notice? I asked instead. Oh, Sarah. You still don't understand how deep this goes, do you? Linda's laugh was genuinely amused now. Patricia Henley's life insurance policy was just the beginning. Did you know Robert's been paying his late wife's credit card bills for 3 years? Automatic payments from his checking account to keep her excellent credit rating active. My blood turned cold. She wasn't just stealing from dead people, she was using their identities to build an ongoing financial empire. Robert knows about Patricia's accounts, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Robert knows what I want him to know. Poor man, still so devastated by grief that he barely pays attention to his bank statements. Amazing how many expenses come up for a woman who's been dead for 36 months. Linda stood up, smoothing her tennis skirt. $50,000, Sarah. Final offer. Take it and disappear, or tomorrow morning your college friends wake up to some very interesting photos in their email inboxes. What photos? But even as I asked, I remembered the blackmail threat from earlier. Let's just say your father would be very disappointed in some of your extracurricular activities junior year. Amazing what a good private investigator can dig up, especially when you give them unlimited resources. She dropped the envelope on the bench beside me. Cash is inside. Count it if you want. You have until midnight to decide, take the money and vanish, or watch me destroy what's left of your reputation so thoroughly that no employer will ever hire you. Linda walked away without looking back, her tennis shoes silent on the park path. I sat frozen, staring at the envelope, knowing that every federal agent in the area had just heard her admit to identity theft, financial fraud, and blackmail. But somehow, I still felt like she was winning. Agent Torres appeared beside me within minutes, no longer pretending to read her newspaper. Did you get all that? I asked. Every word. We've got enough for federal charges now. But her expression was troubled. Sarah, we need to move fast. If she's got $50,000 in cash readily available, she's planning to run tonight. Agent Torres was already on her radio before we left the park. We need immediate surveillance on Linda Coleman's residence and known associates. Subject may be preparing for flight. But when we arrived at Dad's house 30 minutes later, Linda's Mercedes was gone and the front door stood wide open. Torres drew her weapon as we approached, though the house felt empty even from the driveway. Clear, she called from inside. But she left in a hurry. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere, couch cushions thrown aside. But it was Dad's office that made my stomach drop. The safe I'd found behind his diploma was open and completely empty. She knew about the safe, I said, staring at the bare metal interior. But how? I never told anyone about it except. My phone rang. Robert Henley, and his voice was shaking. Sarah, Linda just left my house. She had a key I never gave her, and she took boxes from Patricia's old study. I tried to stop her, but she had 2 men with her. Big guys. What was in Patricia's study? Financial documents, old checkbooks, Patricia's identification papers. Sarah, she's had access to my house for months. Maybe years. Robert's voice cracked. She played me just like she played your father. Agent Torres grabbed my phone. Mr. Henley, this is FBI Agent Torres. We need you to check your bank statements immediately, especially any accounts connected to your late wife. While Robert put us on speaker and logged into his online banking, Torres called for backup units to Linda's last known addresses. But I already knew they'd find empty houses and forwarding addresses that led nowhere. Oh God, Robert's voice came through the phone. Patricia's savings account shows a wire transfer this morning. $73,000 to a Cayman Islands bank. What time? Torres demanded. 11:47 a.m. Just 2 hours before Linda met me in the park with $50,000 in cash. She'd been planning her exit strategy even while offering me hush money. Torres was coordinating with what sounded like half the FBI when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Consider it a goodbye gift. L. The message in my inbox contained a dozen photos that made my hands shake. They were from college, but cropped and edited to look far worse than reality. Linda had taken innocent images, me at parties, me with friends, me in my dorm room, and manipulated them into something that could destroy my reputation forever. But attached to the photos was something unexpected, a document labeled insurance policy. I opened it to find a detailed spreadsheet listing 4 names, dates, and financial amounts. Robert Henley, $347,000 over 3 years. James Martinez, $89,000 over 18 months. David Coleman, my father, $203,000 over 8 years. And a 4th name I didn't recognize, Michael Foster, $127,000, marked as ongoing. Agent Torres, I called, showing her the screen. Linda just sent me her entire operation. Names, amounts, everything. Torres stared at the document, her face pale. This is a confession. Why would she? Her phone rang, cutting her off. Torres, she answered, then listened for 30 seconds before her expression turned grim. We have a problem. Linda Coleman just walked into Channel 7 News with her attorney. She's claiming you coerced her confession in the park and that this entire investigation is retaliation for her refusing to be blackmailed by you. My blood turned to ice. Even in retreat, Linda was still playing offense, turning her own crimes into evidence of my supposed corruption. There's more, Torres continued after hanging up. She's filed federal charges against you for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Claims you've been working with Robert Henley to access his late wife's accounts and frame her for the thefts. Linda's final move. If she couldn't silence me with money or threats, she'd drag me down with her. The news van was pulling away from Channel 7 when Agent Torres got the call that changed everything. Coleman's attorney just withdrew from the case, she said, hanging up with a grim smile. Apparently someone called the Bar Association about a lawyer who knowingly filed false federal charges. Funny thing about that insurance policy document Linda sent you, it included dates and account numbers that perfectly match our ongoing investigation into the Cayman Islands banking network. I stared at her. You were already investigating Linda. We've been tracking a multi-state identity theft ring for 8 months. Your stepmother just handed us the missing piece, a complete client list with documentation. Torres showed me her phone. That fourth name, Michael Foster. He contacted us 6 weeks ago about suspicious activity on his deceased brother's accounts. Linda's been running the same scam simultaneously across 4 states. Within hours, everything unraveled for Linda with the same precision she'd used to destroy my credibility. The Cayman Islands Bank, faced with federal seizure orders, released records showing $847,000 in transfers from accounts belonging to deceased individuals. Linda's private investigators turned out to be part of a professional fraud network that flipped on her the moment FBI agents appeared at their offices. But the most satisfying moment came when Tommy Chin called at 6 p.m. Sarah, you're not going to believe this. Linda just showed up at my lot with a U-Haul, demanding I load both Mustangs immediately. Said she had court orders. What did you tell her? Told her I'd already returned the cars to their rightful owner about an hour ago. The look on her face was priceless. I ran outside to find Dad's 1967 Fastback sitting in Mom's driveway, gleaming like it had never been gone. Tommy had delivered it while I was at the FBI office, along with a note, the rest of the collection is in secure storage until this mess gets sorted out. Your dad would be proud. The final chapter played out over the next 3 days. Linda's carefully constructed web of lies collapsed under federal scrutiny, revealing a fraud operation that had stolen over $2.3 million from grieving families across 6 states. The handwriting expert, faced with Linda's confession and banking records, admitted the will was obviously forged and apologized for his earlier inconclusive findings. Margaret Whitman filed the corrected probate papers Thursday morning. By Friday, I had legal ownership of all 6 Mustangs, Dad's house, and his life insurance policy that Linda had somehow never managed to access. But the moment that mattered most came Saturday morning, when I found Robert Henley sitting on Mom's porch steps with tears streaming down his face. They recovered Patricia's wedding ring, he said, holding up a small velvet box. Linda had pawned it in Phoenix 2 months after the funeral. The FBI tracked it down through her financial records. We sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd been victimized by the same predator but had somehow survived to reclaim what was stolen. What happens to Linda now? I asked. Federal prison. Probably 15 to 20 years. Robert's voice was steady. Agent Torres says the evidence is overwhelming. Linda's already trying to plea bargain, but there are too many victims across too many states. Sunday evening, I drove Dad's Fastback to his grave for the first time since the funeral. The wilted flowers had been replaced with fresh ones, Mom's doing, probably, and someone had cleaned the headstone until it gleamed. We got her, Dad, I said, running my hand along the Mustang's perfect chrome. Linda Coleman, Linda Fletcher, Linda Martinez, whatever her real name is, she's never going to hurt another family. The $67,000 in student loans disappeared Monday morning, paid in full with money from the car sales Linda had conducted illegally. The court ordered her to return every penny, plus interest and damages. 3 months later, I started my master's program in investigative journalism, funded by Dad's life insurance policy and the knowledge that sometimes the good guys actually win. The inheritance Linda sold before Dad's body was cold. Every stolen penny came home where it belonged.